Mike Greenberg, Domonique Foxworth, Jeff Saturday, the latter two former NFL players, on the possibility of the Browns at number 2.
Do you see that possibility? The conversation will become, can they sit at 3 and take the quarterback, or is someone going to jump them? Do the Giants need to go up to number 2? Does someone else need to go up to number 2? Do the Browns take him at number 2?
Right.
I have said all along, I believe a quarterback will go 1 and a quarterback will go 2 in this draft.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't imagine that they'll allow it to happen because it's basic supply and demand. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of teams that need a quarterback.
Right.
They are going to be willing to pay, and I think the Browns will be willing to move.
Yeah, but why? I mean, if you're the Browns, your quarterback just tore his Achilles again. Why would you get out? You need one too. Like, you better have everybody pay you a king's ransom and figure some other plan out. The 1 in 15's coming back to you. You got to get one.
Don't point to me. Don't point at me.
Years of success.
And say 115.
I mean, it's just a little different. But I'm saying, if you're the Browns, I ain't just giving
damn hands to yourself.
I can give you a very inexpensive option for Cleveland next year with a quarterback who has had success with Kevin Stefanski. He goes by the name of Kirk Cousins. Can he possibly resurrect it there in Cleveland? He could be like a Russell Wilson kind of deal. All his money still getting paid by Atlanta. Watch that happen. Watch the Browns trade
Deal
out
maker.
of number 2.
With that, let's welcome in Jeff Risdon, managing editor for DraftWire. The other guy on that panel there was Andrew Hawkins, who was a former Brown. So that's the reason for the don't point at me with 1 in 15. Let me ask you this, Jeff. You've done a lot of work on the draft. You still are. If they move down from 2, I know it's dependent on how far you move down. What could they realistically expect to get to move from 2 to, say, 6, where the Raiders are?
Yeah, so one of the weird things this year is that every team has their own first-round pick. All 32 picks belong to their own teams. Nobody has multiple first-rounders this year. That's generally what greases the skids. You remember back in the Carson Wentz trade when the Browns got a massive haul. That was because other teams had a lot of extra picks to give up. It doesn't really exist this year. So let's say you want to go down to 6. You're going to ask for number 6, a first-rounder next year, and a third-rounder this year. And is that going to be enough to convince the Browns to move? It probably should be. But if they're in love with a quarterback, whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, they probably wouldn't want to do that. Because, look, you've got to fix – you cannot go into next year with quarterback uncertainty in Cleveland. You just can't. And they're in a state right now where there is nothing certain except uncertainty. So it's certainly appealing, the idea that Greenberg lays out, that you can find a guy who buys you time. I'm not sold that Kirk Cousins is that guy. He looked dreadful in Atlanta this year. Now, maybe because he was coming off of an Achilles injury. I don't know. Hopefully he recovers from that. But I will tell you, as an older man now, when you turn 37, things don't heal as quick or as fully as they did when you're 30. And Cousins is going to be 37. A lot of miles on those legs. So it's not a great option, but it's also not the worst option is probably the best way to say it.
So we'll look at those options, a couple of them at least, in free agency in a minute. Let me ask you this. How do you determine, at what point do you determine we take a quarterback at number 2? In other words, it's clear there are going to be other guys who are ranked higher on the board. Hunter probably, Carter maybe. How far down do you go? What's the delineating point between, man, we got to take them at 2 even though we've got other guys that are ranked higher?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And one of the things that NFL teams do is that they put guys into different tiers, and they won't want to fall out of a tier where they can't get a player that they want. Let's say, just as a hypothetical, they want Travis Hunter. Who wouldn't want Travis Hunter on their football team? He's incredible. He's going to be the number 1 player on most boards, regardless of position. So can you get him still at 6? Well, maybe. Probably can't get him at 8. Probably certainly can't get him at 10. So if that's who you want, that's as far as you're willing to fall. If Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan, is your guy, and he's another really good one, then you don't want to fall below where you can realistically see him going. And this is an interesting draft because it's not very there's no surefire number one player. There's no surefire number one quarterback. There will be a lot of teams that won't have first round grades on any quarterbacks in this draft. But as they said on the panel, and as Domonique Foxworth sort of rolled his eyes, you kind of have to have the quarterback. The supply and demand dictates that they're going to go high. So you got to be comfortable with what you get, and you have to be willing to roll the dice a little bit if you're going to trade out. That, oh man, am I going to fall from getting Travis Hunter at as number 6 as my top cornerback, or do I have to fall to that next tier where a guy like Will Johnson, who's got some baggage from Michigan coming in, he's probably the next cornerback in line. You have to figure out where that line is. Offensive line is, are you going to miss the top tackle out of that? Because I do think the Browns need some serious offensive line help, especially if they bring in Kirk Cousins, who can't move at all. Those are the things you got to weigh in.